Now, conventional cultural strategies often go for what I think tend to be rather short-term, simplistic goals. Things like place marketing. Can you change the image of your city? Creative industries have become a big fashionable buzzword for some post-industrial cities in Europe and elsewhere, but it is not at all clear to me how sustainable creative industry strategies will be in the kind of economic climate that is emerging following the banking crash. Festival and events and high culture programs are also typical examples. This is a French company called Voyelles de Luxe doing a 5-day street theatre performance in the town of Calais, which is a town of about 40,000 people in northern France, and is the main port town between France and Britain. It's difficult to see what this kind of extremely costly festival will do in terms of the long-term development of the life of a city, of a small town like Calais. But there are other longer-term, more complex goals. And among them we have cities trying to establish themselves as centres of learning, or as prioritising intercultural relations, or creativity in a much broader sense than simply a narrow creative industry. We have cities of memory, which are focusing on the past, as is indeed an important part of Lublin's offer in the Capital of Culture programme. Or cities like Leicester, which are focused on sustainability. I'm going to move on slightly more quickly because I'm conscious of time. The first thing I want to suggest to you is that a city cultural strategy should not be a document, but should be a process, should be a way of opening up that dialogue that I talked about in terms of the interaction around culture, that it should be a way of improving the quality of conversations within a city. The reason why processes are better than strategy documents is that documents produced by professionals, people like me, tend to limit engagement. They tend to close down options. People like me can use our expertise, our cultural knowledge, our skills, in ways that, with the best will in the world, we find difficult to make accessible to people whose culture is actually in question, but who may not understand or relate to the terms that we use. So I think it's more important to talk in terms of the process that is involved, the process of bringing people together to debate and decide why a city has a cultural life, what kind of cultural life it should have, how that should be changed. One of the things that was said this morning in the conversation that I had with the members of the city cultural team and others, that I think was absolutely right, was that it is impossible to reach agreement about culture or cultural policy. It will always be contested. People will not agree because we have different tastes, and precisely because we make meaning differently. We don't all believe the same things. So what matters is not to reach a resolution, which is what tends to happen if you focus on a document. But you end up with a false resolution, because you've written it down and then it's fixed. You get the illusion that somehow you've resolved all the problems. Instead, if you open up a process, it can continue and become something which enables the continuation of that democratic cultural interaction. I'm very quickly going to give you one example of what I think a cultural strategy should do as a process, and then an example of one cultural strategy. So, first of all, I think that a strategy process needs to define a city's cultural ambition. What kind of place do you want to be? Not every city wants to be a centre of high art, or a centre of street theatre, or a centre of heritage. But what is meaningful for this place and these people? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be respected for? What do you want to be the best in the world at? Next, I think it needs to map the assets and the resources. Every city has fantastic cultural assets and resources. Mostly, the only ones that get mapped are the visible ones, the tangible cultural assets and resources. The theatres, the historic buildings, the galleries. Very important are the intangible cultural assets, the traditions, the languages, the cultures, the peoples of there, the associational life, the amateur theatre, the music that is happening. It needs to define a plan of action. It needs to say, if this is our ambition, how will we get there? What is the action that we need to take to bring about and enable the achievement of that ambition? And in doing that, then it needs to assign roles and responsibilities. One of the mistakes that is sometimes made where cultural planning and cultural strategy is concerned, and I'm very happy to say this is not at all happening in Lublin. One of the mistakes that is made is to think that the cultural strategy belongs to one of the stakeholders in that city. Typically, the city council, or the regional council, or the national government, or the big cultural institutions. It doesn't. It belongs to everyone. And the responsibility for delivering it has to be shared by everyone. In the same way that the rest of the economic life of the city, or the environmental life of the city, or the educational life of the city, is a shared responsibility in which all kinds of different people have a role to play and a contribution to make. And finally, the strategy process needs to monitor progress and to ask questions about how are we doing? Are we achieving what we want? All of that needs to happen in a shared and meaningful process that engages all of the people who are interested and willing to become involved to the extent of their interest, capacity and ability.